You think you know someone, their smile, their charm, the way they always say the right thing. But let me ask you, what if all of that was just a mask? A mask polished by years of social expectations, charm rehearsals, and a desperate need to be liked. We live in a world that rewards appearances, where kindness is often currency, where even pain is dressed up in a tailored suit and served with a polite, "I'm fine." But if you've ever had that gut feeling that someone wasn't who they seemed to be, you're not alone. And you're not wrong, because true character doesn't whisper in pleasantries. It screams in silence. It shows up in the way someone treats the waiter when no one's watching. It slips out in moments of stress, of loss, of triumph, and yes, even boredom. That's when the mask slips. That's when you see the real them, and maybe the real you. I've learned this the hard way. People I trusted turned out to be strangers, not because they changed, but because I finally saw what was always there. Not in their words, but in 5 tiny patterns, 5 subtle, quiet signs that spoke louder than 1,000 speeches. And once you notice them, you can't unsee them. This isn't about pointing fingers or calling people out. It's about clarity, about no longer being deceived, about seeing others and ourselves through the ancient wisdom of the Stoics. Because the Stoics didn't care about status. They didn't care about sweet talk. They cared about the soul, about integrity, about who you are when the spotlight's gone. So if you've ever felt manipulated, disappointed, or blindsided by someone you thought you knew, this video is for you. We're going to rip off the mask, not just theirs, but ours too. Because understanding these signs doesn't just protect you from betrayal. It teaches you how to live more honestly, to love more deeply, to trust more wisely, and most of all, to never mistake politeness for goodness again. The world may reward the mask, but Stoicism honors the truth, and in the next few minutes, we're going to find it together. When anger enters the room, masks fall off. That's something I've come to understand, not just from books or quotes, but from moments that shook me to my core. We like to think we know ourselves, and we think we know others, but there is no truer test of character than anger. Not just rage that erupts like a storm, but the slow, simmering kind too. The kind that creeps into our voice, our posture, our decisions. In those moments, you see people as they are, not as they pretend to be. Some will lash out immediately. The tone of their voice sharpens like a blade. Words turn into weapons. They say things they'll later claim they didn't mean. But deep down, you wonder, was that just the real them slipping through? Stoic philosophy doesn't let us off easy here. It doesn't say, "Oh, you were mad, so it's okay." It says, in anger, the soul is naked. Watch carefully. I've seen it myself. People I once admired, leaders, friends, even family, unraveled in a moment of frustration. What I once mistook for confidence turned out to be control. What I thought was kindness became compliance. And the moment they were challenged, insulted, or even slightly inconvenienced, their tone shifted, their face changed, their true self surfaced, and it wasn't pretty. But here's the twist. I've also seen the opposite. I've seen people under immense pressure, humiliated in public, spoken to unfairly, and they didn't explode. They didn't retaliate. They didn't belittle. Instead, they breathed. They paused. And when they spoke, it wasn't to win. It was to understand. That's what Stoicism teaches us. That power lies not in overpowering someone else, but in mastering yourself. Anger isn't a flaw. It's human. Even the greatest Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, they all spoke of it, but they never excused it. They studied it. They warned us. How you react in anger reveals the level of your self-control. And that, in turn, reveals the strength of your soul. Now, there's a kind of anger that's quiet, that doesn't raise its voice, that simply withdraws, turns cold, and calculates. That too is revealing. Some people won't shout. They'll punish you with silence, with avoidance, with manipulation cloaked as distance. That's not better. That's just a different kind of cruelty, less visible, maybe, but just as harmful. And then comes the aftermath. This, I believe, is even more telling. After the fight, after the raised voice or the slammed door, what happens next? Do they reflect, apologize, own their words, or do they brush it under the rug, gaslight, pretend it never happened, as if you were overreacting? I've learned that people who respect you, even in their worst moments, won't hide from accountability. They'll come back, sit down, and say, I was wrong. That takes strength. That takes humility. That, to me, is emotional maturity at its finest. Let me tell you something personal. There was a time I used to think silence after anger was noble. That bottling it up meant I was in control. But I was wrong. Real control isn't in asterisk burying the anger. It's in asterisk understanding it. It's in speaking with honesty, without harm. It's in feeling the fire without letting it consume others. The Stoics taught this long ago, but we still forget. In modern life, we're taught to express everything or suppress everything. Rarely are we taught how to asterisk channel it. That's why when someone reacts to anger with awareness, with calm, firm clarity, it catches you off guard. It's powerful. It commands respect. It doesn't escalate. It de-escalates. It says, I care about the truth more than winning. And let me be honest, this kind of self-control, it's rare, but it's magnetic. Because when someone can hold their ground without hurting you, when they can speak their truth without making you feel small, when they're furious but still fair, that's not weakness. That's mastery. That's the kind of person I want beside me when life gets hard. So the next time you're in a room with rising tension, when the air thickens and tempers flare, watch closely. Watch the way hands tighten, how voices change, how silence forms. That's where character lives, not in the smiling pictures, not in the casual banter, but in the eye of the emotional storm. And don't just watch others, watch yourself, because if anger is a mirror, then your reaction is your reflection. You'll see parts of yourself you didn't know were there. You'll find the cracks in your patience, the sore spots in your ego. But that's where the work begins. That's where growth lives. I've had to rebuild that part of me more than once. I've said things I regret. I've let pride speak louder than reason. But with every stumble, I've come back to one truth. Stoicism isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware. It's about choosing who you want to be, even when your emotions beg you not to. So remember this. Anyone can smile when things are easy, but it's in the flame of anger that you find out what someone is truly made of. Some burn others, some burn themselves, and a rare few, they become the light. Choose to be that light. There's something hauntingly revealing about the way someone speaks when they believe no one important is listening. We all know how easy it is to be kind when kindness is being watched. We smile, we nod, we compliment, but the real test of a person's soul lies not in how they speak to someone, but how they speak about them when that person's not in the room. That's where the truth slips out. That's where character whispers its most honest lines. I've been in those rooms. You probably have too. Moments where someone leans in, voice lowered, and says, "Can I tell you something about them?" And what follows isn't harmless. It's dressed in false concern, coated in passive aggression, disguised as a warning or a confession. But it's poison, it's gossip, and it says more about the speaker than the subject. I used to think this kind of talk was normal, that maybe it was even necessary, a way to vent, a way to bond. But over time, I started to feel something different, a heaviness, a discomfort, and eventually, I realized, people who constantly criticize others behind their backs don't do it to be helpful. They do it to feel better about themselves. They use other people's flaws to mask their own insecurities. But when someone consistently chooses grace over gossip, you notice, you feel safer with them. You trust them more, because if they can speak well of someone who's not there, what does that say about what they'll say when you're not around? There's an elegance in restraint, a quiet strength in kindness that doesn't need an audience. The Stoics knew this well. They believed that our words, like our actions, are a reflection of our inner self, that every sentence we speak behind closed doors is a window into who we really are. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And that applies here, too, when others gossip, mock, or slander. It's tempting to join in, to nod, to smirk, to feel part of something. But I've learned that joining in only makes you smaller. The high road is lonelier, yes, but it's also freer. There's power in being the one who doesn't engage, who gently changes the subject, who says, "I've always had a different experience with them," or maybe they're going through something. That isn't weakness, that's strength, that's empathy, that's someone who knows how easily words can cut, and chooses not to wound. And let's be honest, what we say when we think it won't matter, matters the most. I've been guilty of getting it wrong. I've laughed at jokes I shouldn't have. I've stayed silent when someone was being unfairly ridiculed. I've listened to gossip and let it color my perception of people who never had a chance to defend themselves. It's easier to join in than to stand out, but every time I walked away from one of those conversations, I felt smaller, not just because of what was said, but because of what I allowed. The truth is, every word we speak carries energy. It either builds or destroys. When we speak of others with compassion, even when they're not there to hear it, we're building a world where trust can exist, where loyalty isn't performative, where respect isn't conditional on proximity or popularity. I once met someone who never spoke ill of anyone, not once, not even in frustration. And at first, I thought it was fake, some kind of overly polished performance. But the more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't fake. It was intentional. She had trained herself to look for the good, not because she was naive, but because she understood that words shape perception, and perception shapes relationships. She chose to protect people's dignity, even when they weren't around to know it. That left an impression on me deeper than any clever quote ever could. And when you become that person, the one who doesn't need to step on someone else to stand tall, you earn a different kind of respect. People begin to trust you with their stories, with their truth. They see you as someone who won't weaponize their weakness. And that, to me, is the foundation of meaningful connection. But here's where it gets even more personal. What do your words sound like in the silence? When there's no camera, no crowd, no consequence, when the door is closed and the moment feels private, do your words reflect who you want to be? Because that's the hard part. It's easy to say we're kind. It's easy to post quotes about positivity and character. But when we think no one's watching, that's when we find out who we really are. The Stoics remind us that character is built in private, in tiny, unnoticed moments, in the quiet conversations no one will ever know about. And that gives us a powerful choice, every day, every word. So next time you're in that conversation, the one where someone leans in, ready to dissect someone who isn't there, pause. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be right now? You can be the echo of someone else's insecurity, or you can be the voice of something stronger, kinder, braver, because the way we talk about others says everything about us. And the world doesn't need more clever gossip, it needs more honest grace. There's a moment that changes everything. It's quiet, it's intimate, it might last only seconds, but in that moment, someone looks at you and says, asterisk, can I tell you something? And just like that, you're no longer part of the crowd. You've been invited into a private chamber of their soul, a place where fears live, where pain is stored, where trust hangs in the balance. And how you respond, how they respond, says more than 1,000 public gestures ever could. Secrets are sacred, not in the dramatic, movie script kind of way, but in the real, raw, human way. When someone tells you something they haven't told anyone else, they're not just offering words. They're handing you a piece of their vulnerability, and what you choose to do with it is the purest test of your character. Not how you perform in a crowd, not what you post on your highlight reel, but what you do in the silence, when no one is watching and when no one would know. I've learned this the hard way. I've trusted people who couldn't hold water, let alone a fragile truth. I've watched secrets leak out not in explosions, but in whispers, shared over coffee with a casual, "Don't tell anyone," but, and each time, it chipped away at something I thought was real. Friendship, loyalty, respect. And then I realized something. If they can speak about someone else's secrets to asterisk me, what's stopping them from speaking my secrets to someone else? That's when everything changed. The Stoics had a saying, asterisk, what is not honorable in private is not honorable at all. And that line stuck with me, because we live in a time where privacy is currency and gossip is entertainment, where people collect secrets like they collect followers, waiting for the right moment to trade them in for attention, approval, or leverage. But the truth is, nothing exposes someone's loyalty faster than the way they handle confidential moments. I've been lucky, too. I've known people who guarded my truths like a vault, who never flinched when it could have benefited them to reveal what I said. They didn't use my story for sympathy. They didn't weaponize it when we disagreed. They just held it, with care, with silence, with strength, and those are the people I'll walk through fire for. Because trust isn't built through loud declarations. It's built in quiet rooms, in phone calls no one knows about, in text threads that never get screenshotted, in choosing to carry someone's truth like it's your own. When someone asks, asterisk, can I trust you? Asterisk, they're really asking, asterisk, will you protect me when I'm most exposed? That's not a small thing. That's everything. And yet, so many fail the test. They think silence is optional, that secrets are negotiable, that being close to someone gives them the right to share what was never theirs to tell. But here's what they don't realize. Every time they break that trust, they shrink themselves. They reveal their own insecurity. Because people who are secure in themselves don't need to gossip to feel powerful. They don't need to break trust to feel interesting. They are interesting because they can be trusted. And I'll be honest, I've made mistakes too. There were times in my life when I justified sharing someone's secret because I needed to vent, or just wanted advice, or wasn't saying it in a bad way. But deep down, I knew I was crossing a line, and that guilt never really goes away. So I've made a promise to myself, if it's not mine to share, I won't share it, no matter how tempting, no matter how justified it might seem, because my integrity isn't worth a few minutes of someone else's attention. And neither is yours. This kind of loyalty is rare, but it's what Stoicism calls us to practice. Not performative virtue, but real, inconvenient, silent virtue, when it costs us something, when it challenges our ego, when it forces us to choose honor over advantage. And if you're paying attention, you'll spot it in others too. The way they respond when someone spills a private detail. Do they listen with care or with hunger? Do they change the subject or lean in closer? Do they hold that secret like a treasure or pass it around like a cheap rumor? Watch closely, Because this is where real character lives. Not on stages, not in speeches, but in those invisible choices behind closed doors. And what about you? What kind of person are you when no one is listening? The truth is, how we handle other people's secrets is how we honor or dishonor their humanity. It's a mirror reflecting how much we value the sacredness of trust. Every secret is a test. Every choice is a reflection. And in that reflection, we either rise or reveal our emptiness. So the next time someone confides in you, stop, breathe, realize the weight of what's happening. They're not just telling you a story. They're handing you their truth. And how you carry it will echo louder than anything you ever say out loud. Loyalty in silence is the highest form of respect. And in a world of noise, those who master that silence shine the brightest. You learn the most about someone not when they're around people who echo their own beliefs, but when they're face to face with someone who challenges everything they stand for. It's easy, almost automatic, to be kind to those who remind us of ourselves. We like what's familiar, we trust what feels safe, but that isn't where character is revealed. Character steps into the light the moment difference enters the room. I've seen it happen in ways both subtle and loud. A raised eyebrow when someone speaks with an unfamiliar accent. A forced laugh when someone shares a custom or belief we don't quite understand. Or worse, the quiet withdrawal, the quick judgment, the need to label, reduce, and dismiss what doesn't fit neatly into our worldview. And I've been guilty of it, too, of thinking my way was the only way, of shrinking away from unfamiliarity instead of leaning in. It's something I've had to unlearn, again and again. The Stoics got this right long before modern civilization tried to package it as inclusivity. They believed that we are all part of a greater whole, that no individual thrives while cutting off the collective. Marcus Aurelius said, "What hurts the hive, hurts the bee," and if you sit with that thought long enough, it starts to change the way you move through the world. Because when you mock someone for believing something you don't, when you look down on someone for growing up differently, for dressing differently, for praying differently, you're not proving superiority. You're revealing insecurity, and worse, you're weakening the social fabric we all depend on. True strength lies in curiosity, in sitting with someone whose life story makes no sense to you, and listening anyway. Not to argue, not to convince, but to understand. That kind of listening requires humility. It requires a willingness to step outside your echo chamber and say, "I don't know everything." And that's okay. And it's not just about race or culture or religion. Sometimes the divide is more invisible. How do you treat someone with less money than you? Less education? A different political stance? A job you secretly consider beneath you? Because make no mistake, those moments reveal everything. I remember once watching a man, well-dressed, confident, articulate, snap at a janitor who had accidentally bumped into him. No apology, no eye contact, just disdain, and in that 1 second, everything he said before that moment unraveled. His charm, his eloquence, his manners, all of it vanished in the face of how he treated someone with no power to benefit him. That's the test, isn't it? How do you treat the person who has nothing to offer you? The Stoics would argue that that's the only test that truly matters. Because kindness that depends on similarity, usefulness, or status isn't kindness, it's transaction. Real virtue is unconditional. It doesn't calculate worth based on agreement. It doesn't scale empathy to convenience. It simply is, and this matters more than ever in the world we live in now. Because technology has connected us, and yet, somehow, it's also made it easier to divide, to mute those who disagree, to unfollow people who challenge us, to surround ourselves with digital mirrors instead of windows. But growth doesn't happen in mirrors. Growth happens in discomfort, when someone's life contradicts everything you thought you knew. You have a choice. Lean away in judgment, or lean in with respect. I've chosen both in different seasons of life, and every time I leaned away, I left the conversation smaller. But every time I chose curiosity over judgment, something expanded in me. I became more grounded, more open, more human. And it's not easy. It's hard to sit across from someone who believes things that shake you, who challenges your values, your norms, your truths. But if you can hold space for that, if you can stay soft without surrendering your own identity, you'll become the kind of person others feel safe around. Trusted, solid, and that's rare. Sometimes people think that treating others with respect, even when we disagree, means we're weak, that we're being too tolerant, that we've lost our edge. But I believe the opposite. It takes incredible strength to honor someone's dignity without agreeing with their view. It takes maturity to say, asterisk, I still respect you, even if I'll never see the world as you do. And that, to me, is the highest form of character. Because what if the goal of life isn't to convince the world to think like us, but to love the world despite its difference? What if the true sign of a wise person isn't how many debates they win, but how many bridges they build? In the end, we all want the same things: belonging, meaning, connection. But the path to those things isn't paved with sameness. It's built on the willingness to see the humanity in others, even when that humanity looks nothing like our own. So the next time you encounter someone who sees the world through a different lens, pause, watch yourself, notice your instinct, and then choose who you want to be. Because in that moment, your reaction is your legacy. Let it be one of grace. Let it be one of courage. Let it be proof that your kindness runs deeper than comfort, and that your values are more powerful than your pride. Success doesn't corrupt people, it reveals them. When someone finally gets what they've been chasing, when applause replaces silence and their name is suddenly in rooms they used to dream about, you begin to see the truth, not the polished version they presented on the way up, the real one, the version unfiltered by need, untouched by humility, because now, they don't have to be humble asterisk, unless it's real. I've watched people rise fast, faster than they ever thought possible. And some, the moment they touched success, changed. They became louder, not wiser, harsher, not stronger. They stopped saying, "we," and started saying, "I." They forgot the late nights, the helping hands, the small breaks that came their way, and most of all, they forgot who they were before they were someone. That's when success becomes dangerous, not because it changes you, but because it makes you believe you no longer owe anyone anything. But then, there are the rare ones, the ones who rise and somehow stay soft, who get handed the mic and still choose to listen, who walk into a room full of people beneath them on paper, and treat every single one like they matter. I'll never forget someone once told me, "Watch how the successful treat those who can do nothing for them." That stuck with me, because that is where the truth always lives. A Stoic doesn't cling to titles or trophies. They hold them lightly, knowing they're borrowed, knowing they can vanish overnight. And maybe that's the mindset we all need. That success isn't proof of greatness, it's a responsibility. And the moment we make it about ourselves, we shrink the very thing we worked so hard to grow. When someone handles success with gratitude, with generosity, with grace asterisk, they become more than just accomplished. They become admirable, and in a world obsessed with being somebody, those who stay rooted in humility, they shine without shouting, they lead without stepping on others, and they remind us that the highest level of success isn't being celebrated. It's staying human while being celebrated. Failure doesn't whisper, it screams. It tears through your plans, your pride, your certainty, and leaves you standing in the wreckage of what could have been. And that's when you see people for who they truly are, not in the glow of victory, but in the cold silence after loss. Some collapse, some point fingers, blame the timing, the team, the system, anything but themselves, and some disappear entirely, because facing failure feels like facing death. But then, there are others, the rare few who stare directly into the eyes of defeat and asterisk don't blink. They don't pretend it didn't happen. They don't sugarcoat it. They absorb it. And then they ask the most powerful question a human can ask in that moment. What can I learn from this? That question is the dividing line between those who grow and those who shrink. Stoicism teaches us that failure is not a curse, it's a classroom. And whether we rise stronger or stay bitter depends entirely on how we interpret the fall. I've failed in ways I thought I'd never recover from. I've made mistakes that haunted me in the quiet hours. But the more I resisted failure, the more power it had over me. Only when I accepted it, not as a flaw but as a fact, did I begin to grow. And that's when I saw it. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's the forge of success. It burns away ego, excuses, illusions, and what's left is real. The most powerful people I know aren't the ones who've never fallen. They're the ones covered in scars, who've learned to walk again, who don't hide their failures, but wear them like armor, who speak of setbacks not with shame, but with clarity and conviction, because they know. Real strength isn't avoiding the fall, it's who you become after you hit the ground. And in that moment, stripped of pretense, stripped of applause, your character finally speaks. You want to know who someone really is? Watch how they treat the people who can't do a single thing for them. No cameras, no audience, no strategic benefit. Just a raw, unfiltered moment of interaction with someone they could easily ignore. That's where real character stands naked. I've learned this the hard way, watching people I once admired turn cold and dismissive the moment they were no longer trying to impress. Their smile vanished when they faced someone they thought didn't matter, and that's when it clicked. Their kindness had conditions. It wasn't kindness at all. It was currency. We live in a world that teaches us to aim upward, network with those who can open doors, flatter those who sit at the top, play the game of leverage. But Stoicism challenges that. It flips the script. It says, true nobility is revealed in how you treat the so-called lowly. The janitor, the cashier, the delivery driver, the person whose name you never bothered to learn, the people who exist in the background of your day, quietly holding the world together while being invisible to most. And I'll be honest, those moments expose everything. I've sat at tables where someone spoke like royalty to the CEO, and barked orders at the waitress without a glance. I've seen the tone shift, the posture change, the eye contact vanish, all because the person across from them held no perceived value. That's not just rude, that's dangerous, because it reveals a truth most don't admit. They measure people by what they can extract from them. But when you meet someone who doesn't play that game, someone who looks the janitor in the eye, says thank you to the bus driver, speaks to a child with the same respect they give a professor, you feel it. There's something solid in them, grounded, not performing, not pretending, just present. That's the kind of person I want in my corner. That's the kind of person I strive to be. Because kindness without agenda is rare. It's easy to be kind to those who elevate your status, but it's the unnoticed kindness that builds legacy. The words of encouragement whispered to someone having a hard day. The patience extended to someone struggling to speak your language. The moment you hold the door, not because you're being watched, but because you can. And no, this isn't about being polite for show. It's deeper than that. It's about dignity. Stoicism teaches us that we are all part of the same human fabric. That the person sweeping the floor is no less worthy of respect than the person sitting at the head of the table. What diminishes one, diminishes us all. I once watched an executive bring a team to tears, not with anger, but with a simple gesture. At the end of a high-pressure day, he personally walked over to the overnight janitorial staff, shook each of their hands, and thanked them by name. No audience, no social media post, just respect. And you could feel the shock in the room, because people weren't used to seeing that kind of reverence directed downward. But I think they were looking at it wrong. That wasn't downward, that was equal. That moment stuck with me, not because it was grand, but because it was honest. In a world addicted to attention, dignity given in silence is a kind of rebellion. It made me reflect on all the times I've failed this test. The times I rushed through checkout without looking up. The times I treated someone's service as a right instead of a kindness. And every one of those moments chipped away at the kind of person I want to be. So I've made it a rule. The less someone is seen by the world, the more effort I'll make to see them. Because here's the truth. No one is truly invisible. We just choose where to focus our gaze. And every time we look past someone because they can't offer us anything, we shrink our humanity. But every time we pause, acknowledge, connect, we grow. So if you want to know who deserves your trust, your loyalty, your respect, don't watch how they treat the important people. Watch how they treat the ones who hold no keys, no titles, no influence. Watch how they speak to the cleaner when they spill something. Watch what they say when the waiter gets the order wrong. Watch how they respond to someone who stumbles with their words. Because that's where truth lives. And if they fail that test, if their kindness only shows up when it benefits them, believe them. That's not someone who's truly kind. That's someone who's calculating. I believe our greatness isn't measured in accomplishments or accolades. It's measured in how we treat the people who can't promote us, can't endorse us, can't raise our social profile. It's measured in the respect we show when we have every excuse not to. Because that's where character lives, in the quiet, unnoticed choices we make when no one's keeping score. So the next time you enter a room, remember this. Status fades, power shifts, beauty withers, but dignity lasts. And the way you give it tells the world everything it needs to know about who you really are. Breakups don't just end relationships, they expose people. In the heat of heartbreak, when egos bruise and wounds are raw, that's when true character rises to the surface or sinks beneath the weight of resentment. It's easy to love someone when things are good, but it's how we treat each other when it's falling apart that reveals everything. I've seen people who were once inseparable turn into strangers overnight, throwing words like knives, airing private moments for attention, turning shared love into ammunition. And every time I see it, I realize it's not love that was ever the problem. It's the inability to lose without destroying. There's a moment after a relationship ends that feels like standing on a fault line. Everything is fragile. Words, looks, silence. Each one carries weight. Some people, when faced with that silence, rush to fill it with bitterness. They gossip. They twist narratives. They post cryptic captions. They need to win the breakup, as if pain could be scored and handed out like trophies. But what they don't realize is that in their attempt to hurt the other, they're revealing a deeper truth about themselves, that they never learned how to lose with grace. I've been on both sides. I've walked away with quiet dignity. And I've also stayed too long in a cycle of blame and resentment. But the one thing I know for certain is this: when someone handles the end of a relationship with respect, even while hurting, that's not weakness, that's power. To be able to look someone in the eye and say, "This hurts, but I still respect what we had. I won't dishonor it just because it's over." That takes more strength than any public display of vengeance ever could. The Stoics teach us that we can't control what happens to us, but we can always control how we respond. And nowhere is that more brutally tested than in the ruins of a love that used to feel invincible. The mature ones don't seek revenge, they seek resolution. They don't weaponize memories, they preserve the lessons. And when they speak of the person they once loved, even after it ends, there's a softness in their voice that says, it mattered, even if it didn't last. I remember someone once said, the way you speak about your ex says more about you than it does about them. And it's true, because how you choose to carry the weight of a relationship after it ends shows the kind of emotional foundation you stand on. Do you crumble into bitterness, or do you rebuild from wisdom? There's a kind of nobility in letting go without needing to destroy. In not texting to provoke, not replying to bait, not leaking secrets that were once shared in trust, in choosing, again and again, to rise above the drama even when you have every opportunity to create it. That's what emotional maturity looks like. That's what self-respect feels like. And frankly, in a world that romanticizes revenge and glorifies toxicity, it's one of the most radical things you can do. I've had people ask me, but what if they were awful? What if they hurt you? And yes, sometimes you walk away from real damage, from betrayal, manipulation, abuse. In those cases, choosing distance and protection is not only right, it's necessary. But even then, the question remains, do you seek healing, or do you stay tethered to the wound by constantly reopening it in anger? Healing doesn't require silence, but it does require intention. And there's a big difference between telling your story to find clarity, and telling your story to seek revenge. When someone walks away from a relationship and refuses to assassinate the other person's character, even when it would be easy, that's someone I trust, because it shows they understand something deeper than emotion. They understand legacy, that every relationship, whether it ends in tears or triumph, is a chapter in our story. And how we end it matters just as much as how we lived it. And let's not forget what relationship conflict looks like before the breakup. Do they communicate or shut down? Do they insult or listen? Do they escalate every disagreement into a war? Or do they seek peace even when they're angry? I've watched people turn every small miscommunication into a courtroom drama. I've also seen couples fight with raw honesty, loud but loving, frustrated but fair, and somehow, even in disagreement, preserve each other's dignity. That's not luck, that's skill, that's emotional fluency. I think the greatest compliment you can give someone isn't, "You loved me well." It's, "You let me go well." Because the grace it takes to walk away without trying to break the other person says everything about your strength, about your self-control, about your ability to honor love, even when it no longer belongs to you. The truth is, not every love will last. Not every relationship ends with closure, or clean edges, or mutual understanding. Some end with one-sided heartbreak, with silence, with 1,000 unsent messages. But how you navigate that ending, what you choose to say, not say, do, not do, writes your legacy. Because breakups don't define us, how we act during them does. So when you're watching someone in the middle of a heartbreak, pay attention. That's when their soul is speaking the loudest. And you'll see, some destroy everything in their path just to feel powerful again. But others grieve with grace, and that's when you know, you're not just looking at someone who's hurting. You're looking at someone who's healing, someone who's growing, someone worth remembering. Pressure doesn't create cracks, it finds them. It seeps into the spaces we thought were solid and exposes everything we tried to keep hidden. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for convenience. It arrives when we least expect it, mid-presentation, in the dead of night with a ringing phone, in the heat of a decision that has no easy answer, and in that split second, when the air gets heavier and the clock gets louder, people reveal who they really are, not who they said they were, not who they posed to be, who they are asterisk, unfiltered, unmasked, undeniable. Some people, when faced with pressure, become smaller, their voice shakes, their decisions falter, their mind spirals into chaos. They lash out at others, not because those others deserve it, but because control has slipped from their hands. I've seen it firsthand. Leaders who seemed unbreakable suddenly consumed by fear. Confident voices turn into blame machines, and you realize they were never calm. They were just comfortable, and now that comfort's gone. But then, there's a different kind of person. The one who doesn't flinch when it all starts unraveling. The one who exhales before reacting. Who looks around and says, "Okay, what's the next step?" Not because they don't feel the weight. They do, but they've trained themselves not to let the weight define their choices. They've learned the sacred pause between stimulus and response, and in that pause, they choose clarity over chaos. I used to think that kind of composure was a gift, that some people were just born more resilient, more wired for high-stress moments. But I was wrong. Composure is a discipline. It's forged in small, quiet moments of self-control that no one applauds. It's built every time you resist the urge to panic, every time you slow your breath when the room is on fire. And the Stoics knew this well. They believed that in pressure, we find the gap between reaction and reflection. And in that gap, we either fall or rise. There was a moment in my own life, a business deal collapsing at the last minute. Months of work evaporating in a single email, where I felt that familiar surge. The heart racing, the mind scrambling, the primal instinct to blame, to yell, to fix something immediately. And yet, I remembered the words of Epictetus. Asterisk, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. So I stopped, I sat, I did nothing, just 5 minutes, and in that stillness, I realized, panic is loud, but wisdom is quiet. Pressure isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's a signal that something important is at stake, and when we treat it as a teacher instead of a threat, everything changes. You stop fearing the spotlight. You stop dreading the next crisis. Because now, every challenge becomes a stage to practice what you've trained for. And if you haven't trained, pressure will show that too. Think of athletes in the final seconds, pilots in emergencies, parents in hospitals. Pressure strips away pretense, and it amplifies values. If someone's default under pressure is to protect others, you know they lead with compassion. If they focus on solutions instead of blame, you know they're grounded. But if they explode, retreat, or collapse into excuses, you're witnessing the limits of their self-mastery. And here's what most people get wrong. Staying calm isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about channeling it. It's not a blank face. It's a focused heart. The people who move with grace under fire have learned that emotions are messengers, not masters. They listen to fear, but don't obey it. They acknowledge frustration, but don't project it. They hear the chaos, and still choose their response. I've worked with teams in crisis, watched people either band together or tear each other apart under pressure. And every time, the difference came down to one thing: someone's ability to anchor the room. Not by shouting orders, but by being calm. That kind of presence is rare. It's magnetic, and it's not built in the crisis. It's revealed by it. So how do you become that person? You start small. You breathe before you speak. You delay your reaction by 5 seconds when something triggers you. You prepare when things are calm, so you don't collapse when they're not. You study the moments when you lost your cool, not to judge yourself, but to understand, because every meltdown is a lesson in disguise. Every breakdown carries a blueprint for how to do better next time. And if you're watching someone else under pressure, really watching you'll learn everything you need to know about them. Do they protect their ego or protect the team? Do they crumble under expectations, or do they rise to meet them with humility? Do they reach for clarity, or cling to control? The answer will come fast, and it won't be wrapped in words. It will show in their breath, their eyes, their decisions, and once you've seen it, you'll never unsee it, because pressure doesn't lie. It exposes, it magnifies, it refines. So the next time the pressure builds, don't dread it, welcome it. It's not here to break you. It's here to introduce you to the version of yourself you didn't know was possible. The version that doesn't run, that doesn't rage, that doesn't fold, but stands tall, steady, and silent, right when the world needs it most. You don't need a spotlight to see someone's truth. All you need is a moment, a crack in the routine, a test, and suddenly, what's hidden becomes visible. When they're angry, do they tear down or pause? When someone's name leaves the room, do they speak with honor or venom? When handed a secret, do they protect or exploit? When faced with difference, do they open their mind or harden their heart? When they rise, do they lift others or forget them? And when they fall, do they take ownership or run? These aren't just signs, they're revelations. They don't whisper, they shout. They don't lie, and they don't just point outward, they point inward too. Because the most powerful mirror we'll ever face isn't held by someone else. It's built by the choices we make when no one's watching. When we're tired, hurt, tested, That's when our character speaks the loudest. And sometimes, that truth stings. I've looked back on moments I wish I had handled better. Times I reacted, instead of responding. Times I spoke too fast, judged too quickly, took too much or gave too little. But those moments weren't my end. They were my wake-up calls. That's the gift of awareness. It doesn't demand perfection. It invites growth. So here's my challenge to you. Not just to spot these signs in others, but to search for them in yourself. To be brutally honest about the spaces where you need to rise. To ask, would I trust me in my worst moment? Would I admire me when the pressure's on? Because character isn't built in declarations. It's built in repetition. In the small, unseen moments. In the silence between decisions. And if we choose, again and again, to meet those moments with grace, then slowly, we become the kind of person who doesn't just notice strength, we embody it. So if this message struck something in you, don't let it pass. Take a stand for your own integrity, your own growth, your own transformation. Comment below. Right finger asterisk. I choose character over image. Let that be your commitment. Not to the world, but to yourself. And if you're ready to walk deeper into this journey, to live with clarity, courage, and control, subscribe, because this isn't just about Stoicism as a philosophy. This is about Stoicism as a asterisk way of being, a way of choosing to become, quietly, relentlessly, the person you've always hoped you'd be.